Hey there, horror fans, and welcome to episode 90 of Funny Book Splatter, a horror comics podcast brought to you by HorrorTalk.com. I am your host, James Ferguson. This week, we've got the return of writer Ben Kahn. I last spoke with him way back in episode number 25 when he was just starting his new series, Heavenly Blues, with Scout Comics. That 6-issue series has now completed and has not only been collected in a trade paperback, available now, but has been optioned as a feature film, so there's some pretty exciting times ahead for Ben. Ben can be found online on his official site, benkahncomics.com, and on Twitter as @BenTheCon. In other news, 2018 has wrapped up, and I have shared my list of the top 10 horror comics of the year. Be sure to check it out over at HorrorTalk.com. I've had the pleasure of speaking to a number of the creators whose work is highlighted in the Best of the Bloodiest on this show. Alright, that is it for the introduction this week, so let's dive right into episode 90 of Funny Book Splatter with my guest, Ben Kahn. Yeah, I've been like this. The end of the year has kind of like thrown me for a loop. So I've been just trying to like get it's. I like fell off of the schedule, and just trying to get back on has been like a nightmare.
Oh, I feel ya.
Yeah, but yeah. In any case, let's talk about your book. Let's start right there for the uninitiated, the people that aren't familiar with the last time that I spoke with you, which was way back, I think like episode 25. So like we're closing in on 100 now. So that's how far back this goes. But
oh wow. Where does the time go?
Yes, I know it's been forever. So pitch Heavenly Blues to us. How would you explain this title to someone that you're on the convention floor with?
So Heavenly Blues is the souls of the greatest thieves in hell teaming up to pull the ultimate heist on heaven.
That's
a bank robber.
That's such a great log line. I love it.
A Depression-era bank robber and a Salem Witch-era con artist get approached by a crooked angel for a job that seems too good to be true, and then things just spiral out from there.
That's great. I mean, like, I think I was also described at one point as something like Ocean's 11 in hell or something like that.
Yeah,
right?
Ocean's 11 in heaven.
Yeah.
Gotta get that right.
There we go. Because, like, I like the twists and turns that this book took. I mean, over the course of, what was it, 5 issues?
6 issues.
6 issues. So, it was, like, you can't go wrong with a good heist movie. And this is, like, it's that in comic book form. So seeing all these twists and turns that come about, and you're like, I don't know who to trust. I don't know if this guy's on our side, or if he's working for the bad guys, or like, and in the scheme of things, the bad guys are heaven. Like, it's kind of like funny when you look at it like that. So,
especially when you get to issue 6, the main adversaries are 2 angels.
Yeah, and it's just cool.
But
yeah,
it was definitely cool because I love heist stories. So especially as you throw more and more fantastic in there, I definitely think just it was a good roadmap and something some people hold on to, just that heist structure.
Yeah. Like, how do you plan something like that? Because I feel like, a good heist, you have those like cliffhangers and these pratfalls throughout the thing where you're like, oh, you're misdirections where you think something's going on over here, but really it's something else on the other side. Like, how did you kind of lay all that out?
So more than other stories I've done, this one, because it was like the heist nature, I needed to know exactly how it was going to end. Like, before it started. Like, before I even started, I needed to know the exact mechanics of the heist and who would do what and how that would all interact. Because when you have that many moving pieces, I needed to know exactly how it was going to end. Because I needed to have I needed all 5 issues in order to properly set up everything that needed to be get all the dominoes in just the right place for everything to be knocked down. And some other books, I can be a little more freewheeling about where it goes, but this one required a lot more intricity and planning, just making sure I knew what each of the 5 main characters was doing and how to make sure that skills was there and how there would be a character arc that tied into the climax.
Yeah, so like I guess that was all in like the planning phase and kind of outlining it. Since you knew where it was going, you had to kind of like line all those up and pace it out.
Yeah, there was definitely changes made once I was on the road, like pretty much, especially almost the entirety of what ended up being issue 3, the really escape from hell while everyone's out hunting them. That really wasn't in any of the outlines. That kind of came across organically, realizing just this moment that initially was just one action sequence really just needed to be fleshed out into an entire issue. that, we needed more time to say kind of goodbye to the location before we then spent the rest of the series in heaven. But it definitely worked out, just because kind of even in the outline stage, the middle was a little more fluid and amorphous, so there was really space to do it without having there was really space to then do this kind of very expanded issue 3 without necessarily having to cut things out of issue 5, let's say.
And the characters, well, before we get into the characters, so you said you loved heist stories, movies like that. Like what were some of the ones that you would look to for inspiration when working on Heavenly Blues? I
mean, Ocean's 11, you say it's become such a shorthand for the genre, and for great reason. It's just such a well-told, well-constructed, well-paced, when I just think of a heist movie that hits every beat you need to, the quintessential beat, it's Ocean's 11. That's the template. But even still, it's not like that one invented it. You go back, you have Sting, The Italian Job, hell, the Sly Cooper video game series. So I would say a lot of those are my inspirations, but definitely Ocean's 11 has got to be the blueprint you look at, the setting up the job, the putting the team together, all the the locales, all the ways the various team members interplay with one another, the twists, the turns, it's all there.
And then adding the supernatural angle to it certainly makes things interesting. Well, especially for horror fans, but in general, why the afterlife in terms of a locale for this?
I mean, that was everything. That was the whole premise. That was the very first kernel, was just heist in the afterlife. I've always had kind of an interest in heaven and hell because they make no sense to me. There seems to be lots of holes, fallacies, contradictions. So more than and I love cities. I'm a city person. I live in New York. I've lived in Philadelphia, London, San Francisco. I love cities. So to me, heaven and hell was always just presented as an amorphous, endless landscape of just feeling. So to me, I was much more interested in constructing a version of these that seemed like places could actually existed for decades and centuries at a time. So I was very interested in creating a new kind of metropolis language for the afterlife. So the setting was, I've always been really interested in the setting and in that kind of familiar yet new world building opportunity. So doing this heist story in the afterlife was always there at the DNA. That was always the very first premise, was just sentence 1, heist story in the afterlife.
And, you hit on some really cool points in terms of defining the afterlife. Yeah, it's not just a feeling. We're not talking about, just a bunch of clouds and just, fire and brimstone. There is a very city feel to it in both Heaven and Hell, in Heavenly Blues, where, it's not your stereotypical version of that. So, how did you come about that?
I think probably one of the big influences was Terry Pratchett's Eric. That there's a chapter where they go to hell, and it's boredom is much more potent than actual torture. So kind of the idea of emotional and mental torture over physical was always an idea that stuck with me. And then that carried over into the sense of hell, of just there being that the real hell isn't necessarily the torture which wears off quickly. It's just more the sense of purposelessness, of meaninglessness, of not having nothing to aspire to. And then those themes fit very nicely into what I kind of feel is kind of that scrappy underdog ambition that's at the heart of the heist, of the very appeal of the heist story. Someone with not much means or luck on their side, just taking on the powers that be and taking what the world won't give them. So I felt that sense that really played well into it. We looked at a lot of real world architecture. So in Hell, you have a lot of kind of the favelas of Rio de Janeiro's in there, a lot of kind of 1920s kind of that kind of era in architecture. The main character Isaiah Jefferson kind of grounds that in that kind of Depression era Chicago, I feel. And then, especially when we get to explore all the different areas, that was especially incorporating in elements of late 19th century Hong Kong, ancient Egypt. So it was really fun making this, kind of bizarre patchwork jigsaw of hell. And then Heaven was a little more focused in on, kind of having this kind of European Paris village feel combined with kind of Manhattan sense of scale and with a bit of je ne sais quoi of gentrified Brooklyn in there. One of my favorite things we put in there is there's a gaming quarter in Heaven with a hell-themed casino, and we never go in, and you only ever see it in the background, but just the thing that's a thing that exists in our version of Heaven, I think says a lot about the world.
Yeah, I think I love what you said in terms of looking at it as boredom for hell, especially, like, because one of my biggest fears is boredom, like, and I find myself like when I have to go on a trip or something like that, I'm less concerned with making sure, like, I packed underwear and socks, but more concerned with having, enough entertainment to last for the plane ride or the car trip or whatever it is, that whether that's comics loaded on a tablet or books or movies downloaded on my phone or something like that, just so there's never a point where I'm like, I have nothing to do and I'm bored. That's like a terrifying thought to me, and thinking that of as eternity is really chilling to me. So I get that 100%.
Yeah, because to me that was always a much more relatable thing, and I think that's in its own way is kind of easier to wrap your head around than just the torture dimension.
And the fact that you're right, it does lend itself. Yeah,
it's just hostile. It's just hostile forever.
And it does lend itself to that kind of scrappy underdog, because it's like you have a character or characters, that, like, despite all those things against them, despite all these things that are working against them, they're still like, no, we're not gonna let this define us or kill us. We're going to rise up above this and do something about it. And that's one of the reasons what makes the characters so relatable, I think, is that they're not going to stand by and let life just kind of, or the afterlife just kind of like kick them over and over and over again. They're going to stand up and do something about it.
Man, Eminem knew what he was talking about. That whole, you got one shot, make it or break it. It's a compelling narrative.
So it's great. But let's talk about the characters a little bit, because you do have kind of you have the entire history basically to choose from, and you picked people from specific eras.
It was definitely me kind of in getting to play around in the toy chest, getting to play with all the the most fun looking action figures, and I figure this is kind of the only premise that really lets me use history as such a toy box without it being a time travel story. So I thought that was fun. Really just getting to make a who's who all-star and also get to satisfy my inner lost superfan by engaging in the whole flashback structure.
Yeah, I mean, that was a great, like, way, like, it seemed like each issue was kind of focused on a different character, and you're able to just kind of, they might start, like, as almost like a side character, but then, like, you, with their own issue, with that focus on their background, like, you push them right into the spotlight, and suddenly it's like, you look at them in an entirely different set of eyes, and it's like, oh, okay, no, this is, now I relate to them, now I'm more invested, and that goes through each member of the cast, and it's like, you may be like, oh, well, this is just, some weird cowboy or a samurai, like, all right, yeah, I know this character, but then when you dig into their backstory, like, no, you didn't know this character. This is really what they're all about, and they faced all these kind of adversities in life, and that's what's driving them in the afterlife.
Yeah, I really wanted to be able to use the flashbacks to really kind of inform you who they were in the afterlife, like who they were in life, how they died, because I have to imagine that's one of the most traumatic things you can deal with, and just the inherent emotional appeal of how do you emotionally deal with your death. Not a thing people usually have to emotionally process.
And do you think that's like a conversation starter? Is like, like when you meet someone new in heaven or hell, it's like, so how'd you die?
Oh no, I think it's like prison where you never actually say what you did to get in.
The unspoken rule.
Yeah, but no, it was really interesting. Like, and especially with 5 characters was definitely a very deliberate choice. As much as I point to Ocean's 11 as what to do, and a perfect example of the genre, 11 characters, I'd say maybe 3 get adequate focus, 4 if we're being real generous. And the rest were just kind of, here's this guy's gimmick and what little tiny thing they contribute to the plan. And so I really wanted to avoid that feeling. I wanted especially if I am pulling this whole like all-star heist team, I really wanted every member to feel essential and to feel like a character. Thinking about how to do this all in 6 issues, I felt like focusing on each of the 5 for the first 5 and then just going all in on the heist for the finale could make for a good framing structure. But yeah, really I figured with 6 issues worth of space, 5 is probably the maximum amount of characters that I can really give the proper focus to and give the proper development to and give them each compelling dynamics with each other. So it was definitely like trying to make sure a balancing act and making sure that all the characters felt that, that they weren't just the samurai and bringing sword to the table, but, had their own emotional arcs and dynamics to bring.
Yeah, and it definitely comes through in that. Like I said, you relate more with the characters, and that in turn makes you more invested in the story. So then it's not just like, this is a cool heist and I want to see how they're going to pull this off, but I want to see this pulled off because they have so much on the line. And with each of those stories that you go through, it's like, oh, well, this is why they're doing this. This is why it's so important that they get this, that they're successful in this. So it's kind of awesome in that regard.
Oh, yeah. Very cool. It was definitely, because there's definitely the why and the how, but if I figured, because when I kind of started Heavenly Blues, was definitely kind of a bit, just kind of creatively and emotionally, kind of the premise came from a bit of a low point. So it was kind of about, trying to will that journey of like starting low, like starting real low, like kind of starting at your lowest point in hell, kind of forcing an opportunity, just trying to make like one last thing happen and kind of going with it and trying to get that one last shot. So it was pretty easy to kind of pour a lot of those feelings of desperation and hope into those characters. And cathartic to do so as well, for sure.
I guess if you're able to, you said you were going through a patch or whatever, like if that was something that you're able to express through comics, and using that medium as a way to kind of like get something through, like that's I hope helps.
Oh yeah, no, it was definitely satisfying, especially the final issue, and feel like I was going with the characters and making it out and like pulling off this big elaborate story and making it out the other side. So it definitely, in that Grant Morrisian sense, I felt like I was going on that journey with them and, just pulling off, with my little like serial killer murder board, tracking every character's plot progression on intersect page for page. And so I also kind of feel that feeling of pulling off an elaborate, like heist in its own way, and then kind of coming out with the feeling of victory. So it's been nice. It was definitely more, I definitely finished the book on a more triumphant state than when I started it.
Great, man. That's comics. That's the beauty of comics. Now, if I remember correctly, I think I remember reading that this got optioned somewhere, it got picked up somewhere. Mm-hmm. So obviously you probably can't talk a lot about that, but like that's got to be an awesome feeling. That like this is what, like your second or third comic, like it's.
Yeah. No, it's cool. So again, I can't say too much about it. Gonna be looking to make some cool stuff happen with it after the new year. It's in some like good hands. Mitch Smith is one of the producers in there, so it's definitely in some good hands. I've seen some of the plans they want to go with it, who they want to attach, where they want to go with it. So it could be a really exciting thing. So we're just gonna keep knocking on wood on that front.
Was it optioned for film or TV, or is that like kind of TBD?
Film.
Yeah, I mean that's look, it lends itself to it.
So right now we're hoping, the hope is good as a movie. Yeah, especially because this one I've definitely done stuff where I feel like this could be like second arcs. It was more about setting up sort of status quo. Heavenly Blues was kind of always paced as a movie with a beginning, middle, and end that all happens in this one volume.
I mean, like, you could certainly, I mean, I don't know, you do kind of end it in such a way that, like, you don't need to do anything else, but, like, I don't think anyone would mind ever, seeing more from these characters again,
Yes. No, but, so I feel very happy with where I left it. It was always, like, I kind of went into it being like 6 issues, no more, no less. That's like, I need 6 issues to tell this story, and that's how it should be done. And I feel, so I feel like there's definitely more stories that could be told, like more paths these characters could go. But, because I hate a sequel that's just there for its own sake. And so I feel so much about what was fun to do about Heavenly Blues was exploring the world of heaven and hell, and getting to explore so many of those themes and the trauma and rejection of redemption and that kind of path, and finding yourself, and all those great themes about themes and the afterlife that I really enjoyed exploring. I'm not sure if those would then be there for like a sequel. It would more just be about taking these characters and the appeal of these characters and advancing them and seeing where they go from there. But I feel, and not that it would be gone completely, but I feel like a lot of the more of kind of the world building and thematic building that made Heavenly Blues such a joy to write, I'm not sure could be captured again quite so easily. So I feel real good about kind of really ending off on these characters, kind of having completed, the greatest feat of their lives, and with how we leave things off. And I feel like there's also maybe some fun, again, they end, let the reader kind of imagine what their lives become afterwards.
Yeah, you can kind of fill in those blanks with whatever, because you do leave it, like, obviously I'm not going to spoil anything here, but like you leave it in such a way that like you could kind of, I don't know, play around with it.
I don't think there's anything wrong with leaving them wanting more.
That's the idea that you want to play around in there. So.
Like, even if it would be more of a sequel than, like, just simply a continuation. Because I really do... Because the idea with Heavenly Blues really was to create something that was completely self-contained and told its own story completely.
Now, so right now, what's next for Heavenly Blues outside of whatever may happen in the big screen? The trade paperback, the collection is finally getting released in January 2nd, right? So
yes, so January 2nd, the trade paperback from Scout Comics, Heavenly Blues, collects all 6 issues, complete story, with a brand new original cover by series artist Bruno Hidalgo.
Right. Yeah, because to be able to sit down and read it all in one shot is a pretty great feeling if you miss it in the single issues, because it sounded like this was something that like kind of heated up and then might have been tough to find for some folks for single issues, and now you can pick it up in one. Who doesn't love a good trade paperback? It's one of those things.
Yeah, you can order it from any regular local from any local comic shop, or purchase it direct from the Scout Comics website.
Yeah, I mean that's great. I mean, now the shitty interview question now is like, okay, you've gone through this whole thing. You got 6 issues. The trade paperback's out. What's next? Like, what else you got going on?
So yes, Bruno and I are working on a new series called Griffin, Galaxy's Most Wanted. It's been announced. It's going to be a digital first series. You can catch it through Comixology and SBI, Starburns Industries Press. The first chapter is going to be in SBI's Free Comic Book Day this May. We're going to be looking to launch it spring 2019, and it sees humanity has taken to the stars and crushed it in its iron grip, and it's up to one traitor captain driven insane to recruit a crew of mad scientists and rogue officers to burn down the universe and end humanity's tyranny.
Yeah, I mean, like that. Starburns Industries Press has been heating up lately. Like they've been picking up a bunch of like really great stuff, and it looks like their Free Comic Book Day is like issue is one that, like, between that, I think Nasquatch is in there, which is like a race car driving Sasquatch. Like, yes.
Yeah, so you can see, so the kind of the first art of the characters you can see are actually on that Free Comic Book Day cover of Lila Griffin in their prison uniform and first officer / hostage Telika. But yeah, pretty much genderqueer psychopath punches space Nazis with their fists of science.
What is not to love about that sentence? That's great. And it's great that you guys were able to.
I do like my log lines.
Now how do you sit around to come up with something like that? Because you've had two you just hit me with over the course of this chat that are like, you can't not get excited about that. Like, how do you have any like suggestions on how to make a good log line with that, or is that something that comes about when you're thinking about the story or premise of the story?
So yeah, like Heavenly Blue started with heist story in the afterlife. So it started with a real simple, like 3-word however many words. I don't feel like counting the sentence. Griffin, Galaxy's Most Wanted, kind of came from, you want to talk about, but, Griffin came more from kind of the proliferation of more Star Trek style shows and just, hey, the world's a goddamn nightmare. So you want to talk about feelings, if a lot of how I was feeling about my career creatively went into Heavenly Blues, then a lot of feelings of just, holy shit, the world is awful and insane and I'm so goddamn angry all the time is going into Griffin. So, work is catharsis, so hopefully good products come out of that. But no, it's been real fun, kind of shifting gears, because first Shaman, then Heavenly Blues, I've definitely kind of been working in a bit of the urban fantasy genre, so it's been nice kind of switching gears to more sci-fi, and Bruno's whipping up some real crazy styles. I'm looking at real cool stuff, bringing in really unique, interesting visuals. I'm looking at stuff like Mike Mignola, Mobius. So it's awesome just seeing Bruno's style evolve for this new story. So that's going to be Griffin, Galaxy's Most Wanted. It's going to be a Comixology first series, and it'll be out this spring in 2019. That's
great, man.
And then some other stuff I can't really talk about, so we're going to move on that one.
But more to come, it sounds like. So that's the life of an indie comic writer never ceases. I don't know where I'm going with that sentence. It's constant writing, constant juggling of a bunch of different things. Like, I guess, how do you juggle something like that where it's like, all right, so you have a book with Scout, you previously had a book that you did with Kickstarter with Shaman, you did, now you have this one with Starbird's Industry Press. Like, are you just kind of like actively pitching out ideas? Do you kind of decide which ones you want to
Absolutely.
pitch? Are there any that you want to hold on to and maybe just do another Kickstarter for? Is Kickstarter kind of like a last resort?
No. It's great. If you can get a publisher, either get in stores, help you with Comixology, and their marketing, the legitimacy. Working with a it can be really tough, and it's, definitely not easy, but I think, a good publisher can bring a lot to it. Scout has definitely done a lot to help Heavenly Blues. It's going to be great working with SBI and having Griffin up on Comixology, which I'm really excited about. But yeah, no, that's a big part of, the indie comic creator life is making pitches, getting pitches out there. I currently have a few other pitches out there, going to be working on a new pitch or two in the new year. Spent a lot of 2018 after Heavenly Blues ended working on some pitches. And I got lucky. A few of them landed, Griffin being one of them. And so I'm going to finish up kind of those projects that I'm now committed to. And then, you keep developing, you keep putting stuff out there, and you hopefully, I've gotten lucky in the past. Hopefully I keep getting lucky with it.
Yeah, you're on a pretty good streak, and you have that kind of track record now, between a few different titles under your belt. So like your resume kind of keeps speaking for itself in those regard.
Yeah. I got some juice. I got buzz. You got pizzazz, kid. I like the cut of your moxie.
Now, with all this creating that you're doing, do you have any time to like sit down? Like, are you able to read anything or watch anything, or is that kind of like you don't want to interfere with your own or accidentally influence your own creative flow?
Oh no, I mean I love comics, so if I'm not reading them, then man, I've lost something. Time is definitely one hell of a luxury. I spend a lot of time on the train to and from work because I work in another state and where I live. That's fun. So I get a lot of reading and watching done. Thank God for all that commute time because I watch all the CW superhero shows and that's practically a part-time job all on its own.
This year. I completely I was in it and then like between trying to juggle the podcast and then this and then like normal review stuff, Legends of Tomorrow. Just catch up on Legends. That was it, but we did sit down and watch the crossover, the 3-part crossover. I'm like,
the crossover's always great.
My wife was concerned. Great. She's like, but like we're not going to know what's going on. I'm like, it doesn't matter. Like that's the thing. Like we'll be fine. We can jump into that and we'll be totally okay.
Look, I like all of them. These are all my precious trash babies. I love them all. That said, and the rankings change every year. Everything usually moves on and down in the rankings. This year it's in Legends, Supergirl, Black Lightning, Flash, and Arrow.
Yeah,
Supergirl's made a massive jump in the very important Ben's Arrowverse rankings. Very important.
I was frustrated last year with Supergirl with the whole weird Reign storyline because it's like they just tried to shove that character in, and I'm like, oh, like all of a sudden you're best friends. Like, come on.
This year and really between this stuff, so much of the lesson of superhero TV is it's really so much of it's the villains. If you've got a good villain, so much of the rest of it just falls into place. And it's really hard to make up if you don't have a good villain. And this year, Supergirl has had, they've been doing like Agent Liberty, this kind of Jordan Peterson as a supervillain, kind of charismatic cult of personality leader. And they got Sam Witwer to play Agent Liberty, who's just such a great actor. And so with that and really kind of taking the political content that they've been kind of experimenting with in the past, but really turning it into 11, it's made for so far a really good, really great season of television.
Now, are capes something you'd ever be interested in tackling?
Oh hell yeah!
Well, I don't know. Like that's why I'm curious.
Granted, none of my ideas will ever be picked up because it'll be like, all right, Aquaman. I know we're coming off $1 billion movie. Who's down for 12 issues of a Baywatch parody? Like out. So I take it we're not doing my Beast Boy Taco Truck like review series.
Hey man. There's still options. They can play around with that with the DC Universe streaming service. You know, there's a lot of options. They're gonna do a lot of experimenting there.
No, I love superheroes. I grew up with Batman, X-Men, man. Superheroes, they're the only things that actually get me out to the theaters anymore is superheroes.
It's, unfortunately, like I joked like last year, I said, if there's not a superhero or a lightsaber in it, I'm not interested. Like it's just, I can't get out there. I love Marvel. I am as big a DC fanboy as you will ever meet. I would love to tackle capes one day. Like, well, what about like an independent one? Like, have you been kicking around things for doing your own kind of like creator-owned cape comic, something like that?
I feel like so much of what I'd want to do for that though was what I did in Shaman.
Yeah.
My first novel, graphic novel I did with Bruno, because that was already kind of, my take that was already kind of our take on, if not a superhero, then someone in that
it's
world.
Almost like a Doctor Strange meets John Constantine kind of thing.
Yeah, and I had a great time with that, and I'd love to explore with the character and that world, but I feel like just in terms of kind of what my take on a totally original superhero universe would be, I feel like I did a lot of that with Shaman. As much as I would love to continue with that if there had been the audience for it, maybe one day. But I feel like with indie superheroes, it's hard because so much of what I love about the Marvel and DC heroes is all the years of, work that's gone into them, all the mythos that's been built up, the themes that are there, the connections they have with all these other characters, and you can do kind of XVs and analogs, but you can't really just make up that magic to this when you're playing in those universes for real.
You get every so often you get something like an Invincible, but like that's few and far between. And then you look at some folks like Lion Forge is making their own superhero universe. They've been trying. Valiant is still out there, but it's just like it's not quite this, nowhere near the same level of impact where it's like, I could pick up a Fantastic Four comic after what feels like years the last time I've read a Fantastic Four comic, and I'm like crying by the end of the first issue, and it's like, yep, this is why I'm reading these.
I'm a big fan of what Valiant's doing. I think I just read Livewire #1 from Vita Ayala. They wrote a great debut, so stuff like that's really exciting. So I think with Valiant, especially the way they've kind of come out there and rebuilt the universe, has been really exciting. But I almost feel bad comparing it to something like Marvel and DC that has thousands upon thousands of comics dating back 80 years. The video games, the movies, the animation, the web, the merchandise. It's so all-consuming. It's how do you I love what, I'm excited to see, there's Lion Forge has the book about the boy who's like indestructible and that's his one power. Like that looks fun. I'm a big fan of what Valiant's been doing, but man, the Marvel DC universes are they're such juggernauts, like across decades, across every medium like we have. And to me especially, the beautiful thing is how they become almost like great kind of Shakespearean roles, how it's always about just putting your own twist on it, putting your own spin on it, and finding something new from the familiar.
Yeah. I mean, maybe that's you're into superhero comics is like Valiant. I want to see a Ben Kahn Shadow Man series or something like that. You could pull that off.
Hey, if anyone at Valiant's listening, slide into my DMs anytime. I'm here.
Yeah, man. I think that you see, especially with publishers like that, they're taking more. I don't want to say chances, but just betting on that next generation of people. There's there are still a draw of established creators, but when you can make noise on the indie scene and get noticed and build up that audience, and then you are able to bring that with you and bring potentially new readers into a crowd like that, that's something that resonates, I think, and that's why you're seeing people like Vita, who's popped up on Valiant now, and she's writing stuff for Marvel now too. It's like, she was doing all this stuff. I mean, I spoke to her for a while ago for the Wilds from Black Mask, and it was like, yeah, that's like something else that was when she hit my radar, but she had a bunch of other stuff out there too that's pretty solid work.
Yeah, and honestly, you look at they're doing Marvel Knights, and you look at the writers on that, Matt Rosenberg, Teenie Howard, Don Kay. It's like, man, what a great lineup, and all people that have really just kind of come up in the last only 3 years, kind of really hit the mainstream scene. So my take on this is that I think it's really important to foster new voices and new talent until I become an established writer, and then I think it'll be very important to stick with the established people that work.
Yeah.
Whatever's the most self-serving for me, that's where I'm at.
There's some things that if it's not broke, don't fix it. But in this case, if you're not involved in it, there might be something wrong here, guys. Let's just re-examine what we're doing.
But no, I'm excited for all the new challenges comics have in store for me. I'm excited for all the new stories and tones and genres and mediums there are to explore. I'm excited for new creator-owned stuff. If I get to pitch on some franchise stuff and get to kind of dip my toes in those waters, that'd be awesome. But until then, I'm gonna just keep making the books I want to make, and life will take me from there.
That's a pretty positive way to look at it, and that's honestly probably a pretty great way to wrap this up here. So outside of that's just a flood of positivity there. So let's end on that high note. Outside of getting Heavenly Blues at your local comic shop on January 2nd, best places to find you online?
Best place to find me online is at my website at benkahncomics.com, or find me on Twitter at benthekahn, and that's Kahn, Kahn, because there's a whole bunch of different spellings.
Sounds good. I mean, Ben, thank you again for chatting. It was fun because I think when we last spoke, it was like Heavenly Blues was like just starting up, and it was like kind of in between, after Shaman was out there, and then Heavenly Blues was like either about to start or maybe the first issue was out or something like that. And now the trade's hitting the stands. It's got option for film. It's pretty cool to see like this journey progress.
It's a fun before and after.
So thanks again, Ben.
Thank you so much for having me. It's always awesome talking.
Yeah, absolutely. You're always welcome.
Thank you.
So that'll do it for this episode of Funny Book Splatter. I have been James Ferguson, and my guest Ben Kahn. You've been listening to Funny Book Splatter, a horror comics podcast brought to you by HorrorTalk.com. We've been bringing you the best in horror since 2002. In addition to comics, we cover movies, TV shows, books, and video games. We've got news, reviews, guest features, interviews, unboxing videos, and much more. Be sure to sign up to Steve's Deals newsletter to increase your horror collection without breaking the bank. Check us out at HorrorTalk.com and at HorrorTalk on Twitter.